everyone. I'm Christine. I've been on these calls before, but I just wanted to introduce myself one more time since I'm taking over from Glenda in leading these sessions with Mark. I am on the CDC team as well. I'm based in Nelson, British Columbia, and really excited to be learning alongside you. This is a lot of content and a lot of deep work. We don't often get to dive deep into impact evaluation, so I'm just excited to be a co-learner with you, and I'm here to along the way to, if you have questions or if you're just like, I just don't get it, just reach out to me. We really want to make this experience useful. It's not just, there's no point in meeting if it's not applicable to your work, and if you can't find ways to apply it and help you tell your story. So I'm very open to meeting with you in between sessions, receiving feedback and giving that to Mark so that we can tailor the course. This is our first time doing this course for CDC, so we are building the plane as we fly it, and so there are bound to be kinks along the way, and we just, it'll be a better course if you let us know what's not working for you. So just wanted to say that. So next slide, Mark. The agenda for today, we're going to sort of recap where we've gotten to. So we're on module 3 today, and we're going to give you a quick recap just to refresh your memory on our journey so far, and then make sure that we have time to dive into today's topic, which is all around how do you read the landscape and the context you're working in, and assess your capacity to make change, and how do you monitor that capacity and tell that story. We'll leave lots of time for digesting the content and questions, and then we'll talk a little bit about the homework from last time and homework for next time. So that's our agenda. All right, next slide. So the recap. So there are three layers of communicating impact. This course is really that first bottom layer, which is all around, painting a picture of how you are engaging your community, building momentum, informing the community of how you're moving the needle around deepening community, around neighborhood connections and engagement. So it's really that first layer. If you wanted to and you had the capacity to go deeper, you could really use all of the tools we're providing to go deeper, to do strategic learning that would help you to make decisions around the content of your programming and interventions, whether you would scale up or scale down an initiative, that type of thing. We're not going to go into that level, but that certainly is a direction you could take it if you had the capacity and interest. Next slide. So we are on module 3. So this is just to paint a picture of the dates ahead. We will be going through module 6 in November. That'll be our final module. And then we do have a challenge for you, which will be to develop your very own impact report. And that can be as in-depth or as sort of surface level as you like. We will give you different examples with different levels of depth of what an impact report could look like, and we'll give you templates to work from, so you won't be building this from scratch. But we really want to, like I said, make sure that this course you're walking away with something tangible that you can use to communicate the impact of your work. So that's the point. It's not busy work. It's not to produce a report to sit on a shelf. It's something you can use in your everyday communications with the public, with your stakeholders, that shows here how we're moving the needle. So key concepts, next slide. We started with 5 principles that you'll want to keep in mind. Again, you don't want to be sharing data around your neighborhood work without having any narrative with that. So no narrative without numbers, no numbers without narrative. You really want to not spend your trying to prove impact. We already have the research. We're going to give you that research that already shows how neighborhood connection can improve safety, for example. So it's really using that research to show your contribution rather than having to prove the value of your work. And again, just remembering to really match your method to your capacity. If you're a one-person shop where you're doing this on the side of your desk, don't, go in over your head on this, because there's a lot of other work that you need to be doing too. So we are very mindful of capacity issues. Next slide. So this is the example from St. Lucia. As they tried to figure out how to increase the population of parrots, they worked on all these different layers, right? So it's around nudging systems, it's around shifting the culture in the community, around looking at the political landscape that they were operating in, looking at what innovations on the ground might be able to nudge. So all these different layers, multi-pronged approach. And if you take that example from St. Lucia and put it into a framework, this is a framework that you could use in your own work, which shows those different layers and how they lead toward your own mission impact, which is whatever you have determined it to be. It could be around community well-being, it could be around community connection, neighborhood engagement. You decide what your mission impacts are. We then introduce the concept of a storyboard. And that really is to help to really piece out your milestones. Sometimes when people tell a story, it's very muddled. There's a lot in there, and it's helpful to tease it out and parse out each milestone and the level that milestone, how that milestone lands on your framework. Is that a landscape milestone? Is that a innovation milestone? So really trying to parse them out. And so, again, choosing them for each of those levels. So really, the key with storyboarding is not to overcrowd your panels. You really want to, piece by piece, step by step, tell your story. You can rearrange it as you go. You can, draw lines and connective dots between them as you go. And if you're just starting your initiative, think ahead. What would you want your storyboard to look like for you to reach that impact? You might not know how the story is going to unfold, but by looking into that sort of future forward mode, you can begin to see how you might actually be able to get towards the impact you're seeking.
You want me to speak to this one, Christine?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I had mentioned this last time. This is from my neighborhood in Edmonton. We live in a kind of a 1950s Aussie and Harriet wonderland, bungalow city, post-war, lots of families, lots of older folks, and we live right across from a nice park. And we noticed that the park was so nice that some young folks would come there to do their low-level drug deals. Nothing dramatic, but it was clear that's what they were doing. And we think it was because it was just easy for people to locate, we're going to be at such and such a park. So we began to organize ourselves just on the block here, and we kind of knew each other. So, Christine, you talked about the power of knowing that social connections lead to things. We know that if you have socially connected communities, they're better able to respond to things. And that sure happened for us, because we very easily got this sort of, we call that staring from our doorstep strategy, where what we would do is someone was doing a deal, or let's say it was in front of my house or across the street, I would phone my neighbor, and then they would come out, and then they would phone the next neighbor, until all these neighbors came out and just watched, kind of eyes on the street. And we actually had a protocol to talk to people saying, hey, listen, we're not judging you for doing what you're doing, but people just get nervous around here. Do you mind doing it somewhere else? It was very gentle, and it absolutely worked. People stopped coming, right? People literally stopped coming there. That actually raised awareness around safety issues in the neighborhood that were beginning to pop up, but they, we weren't a neighborhood that had a history of that. So a local community association, a community league, created a task group. There was a little bit of capacity, a little bit of systems change, and the task group actually led to some work on addressing some vandalism, small-scale vandalism that we had in the schools. So we did CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design, with the police and the schools and neighborhoods, and we added all these little features, and we continued our eyes on the street strategy in the evening, which actually led to reductions in vandalism. And hey, guess what? We got really excited. We thought, oh my gosh, we can do stuff. So we started working on traffic speeding in our neighborhood by the schools. And actually, we suffered a bit of a setback because we didn't get the things that we wanted, but we did get a version of a compromise around traffic taming measures. And This all happened in a period of 12 months, everybody, and the incidence of drug deals and speeding and school vandalism all went down, right, within that time period. So that's a pretty quick storyboard, and I realized here that I should have moved something. This should be here. So if I were to use the storyboard format, Christine, I would say it started with us doing this, then leads to some capacity increases because we have a task group, then for environmental design and for dealing with traffic safety measures. We changed regulations and policies and practices, and it led to this mission level impact. Christine, I don't know if you wanted to remark on this at all, because there's more stories to be had.
We'll just pass it on to Heather. She's going to share another storyboard.
So I wanted to show you this book. That was my storyboard for this project. I wish I knew about this storyboard, because this was a lot harder to put together and nobody read it. I wanted to start off with that. So we wanted to develop a healthy communities plan for our county. And I actually struggled with this a little bit because I was trying to map out, because for the first two, we had a bit of a group, but we did our environmental scan and our learning and all of that, which then ended up forming a more solid core group. Yeah. So I almost needed to have a slide of a group. There was 3 of us, and then the scan, and then the other group. So I'm going to put that little disclaimer in there. But anyway, we have this core group that was formed. We did an environmental scan. We did information sessions. We went to the community and all the festivals that we could possibly get into. The kids ran around in human hamster balls. We surveyed the parents. We got on any and every agenda that any group would let us have on. We talked about it. We gathered what their purpose was and how would they contribute to a healthy communities plan. And then from that, we developed results and indicators, and that's using results-based accountability language, but results are basically our pie in the sky goals, and then indicators underneath that. That was also done through 4 community consultations, and they ranked the indicators and they selected the indicators and they came up with the results. So from all of that, we then did a planning day, which we actually called a celebration. And we pulled almost 100 people together. We talked about all the environmental scans, all what the results and indicators were. And this is, I think, my favorite part of the whole project, was they developed a visual vision. And it outlines, and you can't see it in here, but it outlines all the areas from the indicators and the results in a picture format that went on everything. And people were able to understand where we wanted to go and how they fit in. And then from that, we developed an electronic database, because we had all of these indicators and people were feeding the data for those indicators, but it was all these emails. So we developed an electronic database so that we can share our measurements, and we didn't have to redo surveys when it was already done, and we'd be able to share. And then what we produced a report card, so it lists the result, the indicators, the story behind the data, and then any activities that we did that could possibly contribute to that. And then I left, so I don't know what else happened after that.
Yep. And Heather, you noted you could have started plotting it along a storyboard here.
Yes, I could have done that. I'm going to. It was hard. It was hard to pause, and come up with the big things that happened, because there's also some little things in there. Like this storyboard could have been, I don't know, 50 squares long, but it was hard to really come up with that. And I think Laverne sent an email. It stretched my brain on just simplifying the work that we're doing. We try to make it difficult, and it really is hard and difficult, but how do you simplify it? It was hard.
Yeah. Christine, what are you thinking about these studies and these two little examples? And maybe we want to open it up for comment.
Yeah, let's open it up for any comments. Well, we can come back to the storyboard in the discussion section, but just anything that's just bubbling up to the surface right now for people.
I'm wondering if it's possible for me to get this, like get the background here and put my slides on top of that, because there's certain, like the advisory group, I'm thinking would like to look at this. So that's just a technical question. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's possible, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we'll send this out immediately.
Hi, it's Deborah.
Oh. Well, why don't we jump, Christine, to today's topic, and then maybe stuff will come up.
I wonder.
Someone else.
I don't know if Emily was trying to talk or.
Yeah, I was just going to say it was cool to see the images on the mapping bit, because I'd worked on the homework, and we talk about that it's not linear, but I think it's a good challenge to think about at least the big parts of the project. And Christine, the idea that you got to know where you're going to get to, like what's success at the end, just to kind of bring the group along. Those are all important pieces.
And Emily, you mentioned a good point. It's because remember the parrot story is also meant not just at multiple levels, but that if we're trying to see improvement, it requires the accumulation of many other things. Mm-hmm. Accumulated actions, accumulated little wins. It's everyone wants the big number change, but it takes an accumulation of actions and little changes to make big changes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do is to say, hey, we're giving you a line of sight to impact.
Yeah.
Here. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Deborah, did you have a question or comment too? No. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, we can go ahead then, Mark.
Okay, so I'm gonna just change my. When you're presenting on Zoom, you also get to see everyone's face, and you don't know what you're presenting sometimes. So what we're going to do today is we're going to focus on two other dimensions of things. We spent 2 sessions talking about impact, and now Christine will revisit some of this research we talked about doing at the end of the session, but people kind of have a rough sense that it could be about connections, social capital, and well-being, and that's what we're trying to achieve. It's not parrots, it's that. But on the way, we will also see some of these other ways of tracking things, both at the level of building capacity and the level of navigation. So let's just do this really quickly. Let's show of hands. Has anyone experienced COVID in a way that has impacted their deepening community work? Yeah. Okay, let's just see. Let's just go how. Laverne?
Yeah, we're doing an age-friendly project, so I was imagining teas that people want to go to. Yep. But now there's no teas, so we're phoning for a start, and then hoping by the end of March that there might be a way to get together.
So it's affected your tactics, your strategy of having teas.
Yeah.
Has it created any other opportunities or demands or challenges?
Well, the opportunity to phone up the seniors in our community and ask how they're doing, like how's COVID impacting them? What's the kind of the best of times and the worst of times? So that's the opening. Yep. The opening in the phone calls, and it's together.
The connectivity issue is bigger than ever, isn't it? Right? If people are isolating, they are feeling quite alone. So the demand is higher, and the way of doing it is more difficult. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else want to comment a little bit about how COVID may have impacted their work?
Yeah. We created having the time to do the community conversations piece, and ideally, as Laverne was saying, in person at events. We had glorious plans, I think, and ideas of how we would have traditionally, with our usual events, happened this fall, but have done that real switch to creating the Survey Monkey, which is collecting the conversations, which from a data perspective is handy to have those pieces. I think it's been a challenge for the core team, the volunteers, and even my 20-year-old staff. I'm saying, you need to go and have conversations, whether you're on the street and it's from the sidewalk to the front door, or you're phoning people. this is very different than their traditional in-program work, or I just send an email. I'm like, no, you need to go and have a conversation with these people.
Yeah.
What? So I think an opportunity, a new challenge, and I hope they're hearing some other ideas, maybe even beyond that initial conversation. So
well, I think that's a good summary, folks. Again, both it affects issues of well-being and connectivity. Like that is off the chart. The number of people out of work and number of people who need food and experiencing social isolation, and it also affects how we do our connectivity work. So none of this happens in a vacuum. So acknowledging that factors outside of our control, the landscape affect both those things is really critical if we're about to tell a story, right? Who's not telling a story now saying, hey, how are your results from the section and this last 6 months? And you go, well, pretty good, and here's what affected it, COVID. So, this is really, this is not rocket science, or I don't know, someone once used the term rockets. This is not rocket surgery. Where all efforts to do this work are shaped by the outside context. And so all of you, very informally or systematically, you do context monitoring, right? And all we're trying to do is to say, make this as explicit, make it visible. And to the point you raised earlier, Emily, start drawing some arrows. This happened up here, and therefore this is, that's all it's saying, is to be more explicit and systematic about that. And there's lots of tools for doing this. And when we were mucking around, we're trying to come up with some, we were still using, if you remember from the first session, this idea of level 1 is you don't have much time or energy at all, right? You're kind of working on this part-time and you want something pretty easy. Level 2 is you got some capacity, and level 3 is you got a lot of capacity. 3 different tools. Number 1 is from the 1960s, believe it or not. It's called force field analysis. Has anyone ever used force field analysis?
Yeah.
Sounds pretty Star Wars-like. Yeah. Pretty easy. It just says, here's what you're proposing to do or what your mission is, and there's forces that help it and forces that get in the way. And they even actually give you examples of how to show you of that. Oh, just a minute, I got off. So that's a real simple one. I'll give you an example right away. Number 2 is, who's ever used a SWOT analysis? So unbelievably simple. You kind of want to, you could do it on your own, but you could probably do this with a small group. It's better with the group. And you're just saying, what are the strengths and weaknesses of our work, and what's happening out there that creates an opportunity and a threat? So we were mucking around a little bit with that, Laverne, right? Some of it's an opportunity, some of it's a threat or a pain in the butt. The third one is, if you really get into it, there's something called adaptive management, where people, particularly if you got a lot of time and effort, they're really spending a lot of time monitoring context indicators and paying attention to at that and saying, so what, now what? Now, context monitoring, is anyone ever been to a national park? I have a friend who works there. They do context monitoring of the national park, and they monitor a whole bunch of things. But one of the things they monitor is coyotes. Because coyotes are a bellwether. They're an indicator species. And when the number goes up, it probably means a whole bunch of other stuff is happening, right? And so what it does is to say, well, if the number of coyotes go up, put on your hard hat and go out and look, because you might have to go do some further investigation, right? So they've got all these sort of indicators that they watch all the time. And they have a sense-making process that always says, so what, now what? There's lots of ways of doing it. We'll give you some links to it. It's pretty geeky, everyone. I mean, I kind of liked it, but you really have to have a big team, not a big team, but a lot of capacity to spend time on being as sophisticated and systematic as these folks are. But they all get it roughly the same thing. Now, here's a couple of examples. I just took this from, I was reading the journal, the Edmonton Journal, and here's what's going on in some of the neighborhoods in my city. There's an ongoing turnover in certain neighborhoods. So it's very difficult for people to know each other, right? We got high turnover neighborhoods, you know what it's like. How the heck do you build some level of connectivity and social trust? On the other hand, the city's decision to put a light rail transit line is helping the community come together to discuss whether they want that or not. And we have a little bit of NIMBYism going on, right? Not in my backyard, but there's also people going, oh, well, if there's going to be light rail transit, that's pretty good. Maybe we can advocate for having this coffee shop open right next door. So whatever it is, whether they like it or not, people are coming together to talk about that. So that's something as simple as force field analysis. And again, you'll see that you could kind of weigh the strength of the forces. And what I really like about that is it says that there's always pushes and pulls on whatever you're doing, right? Anyone try and make supper at 6 o'clock on time for their kids? You could do a force field analysis, right? Can I get off my phone call on time? Who the hell didn't go shopping? Oh God, it was me. Like on and on. You could just literally lay out all the stuff that helps and hinders you trying to get supper on the table at 6 o'clock. I'm not going to do much more than this because you understand SWOT analysis. So you could do the same thing. I was thinking a little bit, Emily, I don't know how long, it's Greenway Chaplain, right?
I think we're
Greenway Chaplain.
just about 40 years.
Was that right? Okay, well, we've been around for 40 or 50 years, so we're known to be innovative. What's a weakness? Well, it's being run by a couple of the usual suspects. I don't know if that's the truth, Emily. It was just making stuff up. And we've got this threat going on, and we've got this helping force going on. So this simply elaborated force field analysis. And the final one is adaptive management. Lots of cities, but not all of them, actually have a lot of pretty good indicators in neighborhoods that could be adapted. So any of your cities have something called the vulnerability index? No? Or is that right? Do you have that, Deborah? Oh, well, of course. What am I saying? Yeah. So there's actually lots of stats in neighborhoods. We have in Edmonton a map service with Deborah Morrison who does tracking. So you could be watching those sentinel indicators and saying, hey, we're now number 1, we're now number 3, right? We've got all these indicators telling us how well our community is doing on some contextual areas. So long story short, level 1, 2, and 3, all it simply is saying is be really explicit and more systematic about tracking how your landscape affects both what well-being looks like and your ability, the opportunities and threats for reacting. Christine, just you may want to weigh in here about this, but this kind of seems straightforward for the storyboard. Any one of these techniques could generate something in one of the storyboard bubbles.
Yeah, maybe we could just pause to see if there's any questions around these 3 examples and the levels, these 3 tools.
We should we're not saying these are the tools. We're demonstrating different levels of sophistication at getting at this challenge. So you don't have to use force field analysis. There may be other tools that are that simple. Okay, let's pop on to the next one then. So now we're going to talk about capacity and community connections, and this is much the same. We want to be more explicit about this, and in part because we want to communicate our ability over time, hopefully, that we have increasing capacity to get things done. So you noted that when I gave you that story of my neighborhood, we started with just talking to people selling dope, right? Pretty simple, but within a year, we were doing pretty good negotiations with city staff about traffic calming, et cetera. And again, we kind of lost on a couple of things. In retrospect, they knew more than we did, so we were being unrealistic, but about what we wanted. But that was way more capacity than we started with 18 months ago. We had more people involved, we had more literacy involved, we had more influence, and it was important to talk about that because we could have kept going. So capacity building is the process through which organizations obtain, strengthen, and maintain their capabilities to achieve their objectives over time. That's a UN thing, guys. So we are now proudly part of the UN family. We can absorb and use their definition. So neighborhood capacity building evaluation or community building is the systematic process of assessing changes and learnings of a group, network, or organization that seeks to improve community connections and well-being. So pretty simple, our ability to get better at improving connections and well-being from a grassroots point of view. Again, we have different levels with which we could do that. So number 1 is an adapted, I think this is the simplest one. What's the most significant story of a change in our capacity? Has anyone ever used most significant change? No? I love it. Now, they don't call it most significant story of capacity change. They just call it most significant change. But here's the story of how that technique got developed. I love it. a friend of, she's now a friend, her name is Jess Stark. She's the head of a big evaluation firm in Melbourne, Australia. She was in Indonesia evaluating a program to improve rural outcomes for rural families in Indonesia, and had a strong gender dimension, improving the voice of women in decision making. So she's interviewing someone on a Friday afternoon. Her flight's leaving. This is her last interview of the day. It's 1,000,000 degrees. They're sitting under a tree, and she's interviewing someone, an elderly lady, and through a translator, the lady, when she's asked what has changed for her, the lady takes 10 minutes to describe, and the translator turns around and says, she says the thing that has changed for her because of this project is she walks 10 miles every Friday to a meeting, and she sits there and then doesn't say anything, and then walks 10 miles back. That's what's changed for her, right? And so you're thinking, ooh, why is that important? She said, so ask her what was significant about that change. The translator says, why is that significant? And then the lady says, in the history of our region, no woman has ever been allowed to go to that meeting. But we go now. And then she said, now give this a title of a story, turn it into a newspaper story. And the woman said, next time we're all going to say something. Now, very subtle, right? Like subtle. But I could, look, I've told that story 30 times. I got goosebumps again. That's subtle, but that's significant, right? They're upsetting a gender perversity or imbalance there that you can taste that might be the beginning of something big. So she's developed this whole process now where all you do is you ask people stories. Hey, Emily, Naomi, Deborah, what's the most significant story of capacity change? Why is it significant? And give a newspaper headline. And then what happens is when people tell those stories, and I've done this a bunch of times, let's say you get 36 stories. You could too. It's bloody easy to get these stories. You sit down as a group and you'd say, okay, Emily and Laverne and Carla, you read stories 1 to 6. Heather, Deborah, and Christine, right? You read stories 7 to 12. Naomi, Mark, etc. You read stories, whatever, and we all read them. And then you'd say, group number 1, of the 6 stories, what's the most significant? Group number 2 of your 6 stories. What does that do? It gets us to read all the stories. 2, then we say, oh, I thought our group says story number 5 was most significant. Then we get down to 6. Then we actually get to, we have to all read the same 6 stories and come up with the most important one and why it was significant. So what's brilliant about that is everyone gets to read the change stories. You ask what is significant about it, and half the time it's not even what you expect. And then when you're finished, not only you have 36 stories of change that you could plot on a board, you also have an indication of so what, now what. And I'm going to take 1 more minute to explain a vignette. We did this for the urban Aboriginal strategy of a Western city, and the reason we did this was the group was frustrated because they weren't generating big impacts in their 8 domains of interest: justice, education, healthcare, etc. And so the people running the backbone group said, maybe we should shut down this collaboration. We got 80 people coming, but we're not coming up with projects that move the needle on anything. We did the story, and the story that was on the top of the triangle was a story from the police department. And they said, we actually had no idea that we had such structural racism in our police department. We didn't know. We get yelled at quite a bit, but we go into defense mode, right? The blue line. But when we were sitting here with people who were telling us gently and that we had relationships with, it really got into our head. And so what we did, their story was they now, and this was 15 years ago, everyone, they had cultural safety training, and they had training on colonization and the history of the police department in First Nations communities, right? And so here's what the group decided. Holy shit, the significance of this is gentle relationship building on complex issues. So they not only did they not shut down, they turned their whole network purpose upside down based on this exercise. They used to be a network for production. And then they said, we need to be a network for connectivity. We simply have to learn more about each other, and we will do projects on the side. It's not the center of gravity of the network, but if all these bilateral, trilateral, and unilateral projects come from it because of connectivity, we'll accept that. Anyways, it's a simple technique, everyone. online. If you Google most significant change, it's a PDF document of 110 pages. It is hands down one of my most favorite evaluation processes of all time. Everyone can engage. It's unbelievably insightful, and it's easy to manage. Now, we could geek out a little bit more. Heather and others, we've seen this, John McKnight and others, they have asset-based questionnaires that you can take. And if anyone knows John McKnight stuff and the webpage of ABCD, etc., there are questionnaires that help you track increases in overall capacity of neighborhoods, including a change group. And then if you want to go a step further, the Aspen Institute put together a huge workbook called Measuring Community Capacity. And there's lots of tools and techniques in there that you could take if you like. And again, they're pretty geeky and they take some time, but this is if you're level 3 capacity. So I'm just showing you the examples of this. I've already described it. You might say the most significant change is the number of residents who are now coming out to meetings. And why is it significant? Because we were a small run group before. You could do the John McKnight questionnaire and come up with all these examples of assets all over your neighborhood, including your community change group. And again, you could geek out and do the Aspen Institute stuff, and they have their own sets of indicators and questionnaires. And there's an online workbook which you can download.
And Mark, there's also the Sense of Community Index, which is a questionnaire that's proven you pre-test and post, so you can actually see but shift in behavior.
Oh, good. Well, and see, and I would even argue that could also be a mission impact one, right? If your mission is deepening community, we could have the Sense of Community survey. So this you feeling this, everyone? Same idea from modest to big. I'm gonna say this, of all these techniques, you know which one I like the most. The simplest one is the most significant change. You could easily find stats in there if you want, but you're really going to grab people's attention when they can tell you a story of change. So,
sorry, Mark, and that's how ABCD started, was gathering stories.
Right.
And then they found the most significant changes via those stories.
Yep, there you go. Yep. Natural inductive research. Yep, story. Most people think in stories, everyone. That's why that principle, no narrative without numbers, no numbers without narrative. You can throw numbers in there, but if they don't have a context with meaning in it, it's just going to go. Remember, that's why most people look at numbers, and because there's no narrative and meaning making, they get confused and they want more data. They want more statistics and measures, but it's just noise. It's noise without narrative and meaning. So just want to confirm that whenever you look at this, and Christine and I talked about that, there's no customized tools for neighborhood capacity building. So whenever you see stuff, you're always going to have to be in adapting mode. I get that, but how would I adapt? There's very little that's pure neighborhood-based stuff. So that's round 2. Christine, I'm going to pass it over to you. I've talked enough for the moment. We do have some open-ended questions here for folks. Maybe you can facilitate that. And I will put myself on mute for a minute. We don't hear the construction people.
Thanks, Mark. So we just covered a lot of content and thoughts around both monitoring context in your landscape and also your own capacity as a group to create change. So what questions are coming up for you? Where do you feel unsure or stuck with what you just heard? Maybe where do you need support in trying to apply these tools in your own work? And then did you have any ahas? Was there anything today that you heard where you're like, whoa, we never really looked at this before. This is really shifting my thinking in the way that I'm going to approach my evaluation. So this is a chance for us to really digest what Mark just presented and kind of think about how we might take some of these things away and apply it in our work. So we'll just open it up, and anyone who wants to talk, you can just unmute yourself, and we'll just have hopefully a really rich discussion in these last 15 minutes.
Mark, it's Laverne here. Just wanted to clarify. So the stories that people bring, so you said 36 stories at one point. Were all those people in the room had generated, or other kinds of stories? anyway, I just can't imagine if people have brought their story, how we're going to say which is the best of these, because they're obviously all valuable if people have brought them. So, but I guess it's what the most meaningful for us today is. There's a part of the process there that I don't understand how you can evaluate stories.
And the issue is, it's about why is the story significant?
Right.
And what I like about it is, the word evaluation, I mean, we've said this before, measurement is not evaluation. People get so confused about that. Measurement's just measurement. Evaluation it's in the title, to value something. There are often people that start cranking up measurements, but there's no value framing. So measurements are decoupled, decontextualized, they're useless, really. They're utterly useless. So what I liked about the most significant change story, Laverne, is me and you could be in the same room. We don't even know what value means to us until we see it. So what this does is to say, here's real things that happen simply through a process of looking at a whole bunch of stories and then reacting to it. Because, why do I get a goosebump every time I tell you that story, every time I share that story about the woman in the Rural Development Program in Indonesia? It's obviously something that's significant to me. And, so what it does is say, let's surface what is significant. So it could be, I guess, Laverne, maybe you're wondering, does it turn into a competitive thing?
That's what I wonder.
I'm actually more thinking about, let's find out about what the hell we think is going on and all the cool things going on, and let's see if there's something really significant that's resonating with us that is given to us through a story.
Yeah,
that's what I like.
I understand, and I will look it up on Google. Most significant change.
And by the way, the other thing that's great about it, Laverne, is you could do it in a room, like you said, have people write down stories and then share them. Or you could do it, let's say you're running something and saying, hey, Bob, thanks for that meeting next week. We're looking good. By the way, can I grab 10 minutes with you? Thinking over the last year, what's been the most significant change? You could literally do it in real time. And then saying, hey, everyone, I cobbled these stories together over 3 weeks of conversations. Right, here they are. So it's so flexible about how you pull them together.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, it's Deborah. If I can go next, if that's okay. I think my question is, because our work has started a few years back, I think what I would probably do would be to write kind of a baseline of where we're at and then apply a bunch of these techniques and the context of COVID to just talk about the 1 year and how COVID has kind of impacted neighborhoods for better and for worse around their connection for the ones starting and the ones already together. Does that make sense?
Oh God, and it will what I like about that, what that is called is a retrospective. And sometimes people think you can only do evaluation when you do pre, baseline, and post. But you can as easily do post, pre. Where are we now? And how does that differ from where we started? It's equally as valid. And you were just doing a mix there, Deborah, right? Try and figure out where we were, look where you are now. And then you'll also probably go back and go, you know what? We didn't even know that was an issue when we started. I guess it's a pretty good baseline thing that I only realized in retrospect.
And Mark,
but that's a good story.
From the opposite end, for someone like Naomi who's just starting, and Naomi, I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute here. We've got quite the spectrum in this group. So how would you apply these tools if you're just starting your neighboring initiative and you really haven't gotten much off the ground yet?
Might be in. There we go.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing today, so I haven't been totally with it all. Sorry, I didn't hear your question, Christine, and then your screen was blank for a minute there.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
My question was how Mark would suggest using these tools if you are just getting started, like Naomi in Fort St. John. You're just starting to envision and create your neighborhood strategy. If you're just at the beginning.
I think with the tools is we can build them into the program, build them into what we're going to do. So then they're there then we can get what we need instead of really looking for it. Like we can build stories in and yeah, I think having this stuff, we can build it into the development.
Anyone else have a question or comment for today?
I don't know if this is useful for you, Naomi, but it's just a thought that comes up in my mind because we have a situation where working in a community that has had some significant successes in the past. You know, they built a school, an amazing environmental school here just based on their persistence and, you know, the way they did it. So I ask people to tell that story fairly often because it's just a reminder of what we've been able to do in the past and how, anyway, just a thought. There's usually some past successes that make people feel good when they think about it. It encourages a sense of capacity already existing in a way. Just a thought, as I say.
Just a quick note, you know what, I think there's a bias in the way, at least I presented things. It's also possible for capacity to go down, right? In which case we should talk about that. We always want it to go up, but I guess as the postscript to the story I told, we didn't stick together as a group on the safety stuff. We just ran out of steam, you know, we were volunteers and we did the spontaneous stuff, and then we did 2 rounds of policy change and design, and then we got tired. And the reason I know that is the other day I saw a car again, but we didn't have our network anymore. Some of the people moved, and I thought, oh gosh, I got to find 2 or 3 people, and we got to rebuild this if it gets to be a problem again. But our capacity did diminish.
That's really helpful, Mark. To paint that picture in both ways.
And I can see COVID having that significant change in a negative way, right? So a lot of the members I'm working with, the change is complete halt. So the change is that there's no momentum going forward, or the change is they've been redeployed. An example would be in Durham. It's and for me it's a sad thing, but we just launched their neighborhood strategy, and then COVID hit, and then the lead got redeployed, and so you know the momentum was really halted. But I would actually say the story is that the residents really took the lead, and they did paint nights via Zoom. And it started off with 3, and now they have 8 who come to paint nights. And they're looking at possibly doing a gallery. So that and then there was a craft. The kids have done some craft, and anyways, they're looking at doing galleries. So the one story is for the staff would be the significant changes being redeployed and not being part of this project. But a good kind of story and change is that the residents really stepped up and started organizing things.
Okay, and just looking at the time, I think we do need to wrap up here shortly. So in terms of homework, we had sent you your homework from last time, 2.5. Thank you to those who send it in. We are happy to look over it if you are looking for feedback or are struggling with it or just don't really know how to tackle it. You can always reach out to us to schedule a time to sit down and go through it together. Module 3, we're going to ask you to really look at those milestones around landscape and capacity. Think about them. If you're not that far in your own initiative, think what would you like your milestones to be so you have something aspirational. Look at the tools that Mark suggested and begin to think about maybe other tools you've seen that could help you to monitor your landscape and assess your capacity, whether it's going up or down, and start to play with those tools, whether it's the story tool or the SWOT analysis. Start to think about how those tools will help you in telling the story of your impact. And then use the inspiration from Mark and Heather with their storyboards to continue to plot out your storyboard. So some of you have done that already, verbally written it out. Maybe you want to try to put an image to it to sort of inspire that more creative a visual side, whatever way works best for you, whether that's words or photos. Just continue to build out that storyboard. And we will send you a workbook. You'll be getting that on Monday next week with all of these tools that Mark, links to all the tools that Mark talked about, exercises for you, and of course the recording and the PowerPoint. So next session is on the 24th of September, and we'll send you some reminders about that. Don't hesitate to reach out in the meantime. And sorry again for internet challenges today. I'm glad we were able to get through it. Thanks, everyone.